Close your eyes and imagine the Earth, silent and vast, drifting through the cold darkness of space. The blue glow that once wrapped around it, the invisible magnetic shield, has faded. 90% of it gone. The world is quieter now. The air feels different. The compass no longer points north. It spins endlessly, confused like the heartbeat of a planet that's forgotten its rhythm. This is not chaos. Not yet. It's the beginning of something strange. The skies shimmer with new colors, intense ribbons of auroras stretching far beyond the poles, dancing over deserts and oceans, painting the heavens in greens, violets, and crimson. Beautiful, but dangerous. Without its magnetic armor, Earth's surface begins to feel the whisper of cosmic winds, tiny, invisible storms from the sun, carrying energy that hums through the atmosphere like a soft electric sigh. The satellites above flicker. Power grids hum with uncertainty. The animals that follow Earth's magnetic lines, whales, birds, even tiny bacteria, lose their way. The world feels slightly off balance. And yet, in this delicate moment, there's still peace. Humanity watches, breathes, and wonders. Maybe this is how planets dream, shedding layers, remembering their ancient selves. The Earth beneath your feet still holds warmth, still cradles life, still whispers in magnetic pulses, faint but alive. You are safe, listening to the heartbeat of a world reborn in light and silence. So rest now. Let the thought of this gentle, drifting Earth carry you into stillness, into curiosity. The Earth was once wrapped in an invisible lullaby, a soft magnetic song that curved and shimmered around her, unseen but always there, like a mother's breath over a sleeping child. It was a gentle cradle of power, a shimmering halo that danced between the stars and the wind. And then, slowly, quietly, it began to fade. Not in a single flash, not in thunder or flame, but in silence, like a candle that burns low, its light trembling before the wick gives in. 90% of her magnetic heartbeat, gone, vanished into the vast stillness of space. And the world exhaled a long, trembling sigh. The oceans did not roar, the mountains did not crack. Instead, everything softened. The compasses of birds stilled, their wings hesitating in the air. Deep beneath the waves, creatures that had followed magnetic whispers for centuries paused, lost between instinct and memory. Yet the Earth herself remained steady, her pulse dimmed but not gone. The stars above grew sharper, closer, almost watching, as if they too sensed the change. In the darkness, the sky shimmered faintly with ghostly light, auroras where there had never been auroras before, dancing over deserts, whispering over jungles, curling above sleeping cities like threads of forgotten dreams. It was as though the planet had entered a dream of her own. The hum of electricity faded in the air. The rhythm of the magnetic field, once subtle but steady, was now a distant echo. Humanity felt it not through sight or sound, but through sensation, a stillness in the bones, a weight in the chest, like standing at the edge of something immense. The invisible became intimate. People spoke softly without knowing why, as though afraid to wake the world from its strange new sleep. And in this fading shield, there was beauty. The auroras grew brighter, alive with color, emerald and violet, rose and gold, veils of light that whispered across continents. The nights glowed like deep-sea waves touched by moonlight. The sky had become an ocean, and the Earth a drifting island afloat within it. Time itself seemed to slow, as though the planet were pausing to remember, to recall the ages before the magnetic cradle, before the shield was born, when raw starlight first met her seas. From space, the Earth shimmered differently now, softer, paler, a quiet blue marble wrapped in threads of silver. Astronauts who looked down described it as watching a candle in a storm, fragile, luminous, impossibly alive. They spoke of a feeling that words could not hold, a mixture of awe and sorrow, as if seeing a soul made visible. And down below, life continued, gently, curiously, cautiously, under a sky that had begun to hum with something ancient and unspoken. The wind felt different now. There was a shimmer to it, like breath over glass. Children lay on rooftops and watched the new lights ripple above them, not knowing they were witnessing the Earth's magnetic memory drifting away. And in that fading moment, Something in the human heart softened too. An awareness, a tenderness, a longing to protect what could no longer be seen. The earth was changing, not with destruction but with transformation, entering a deeper kind of silence, one that asked to be felt rather than feared. The world waited. Quiet, luminous, alive in its slumber. The magnetic lullaby was almost gone, but its echo wrapped around every living thing. It hummed through roots and rivers, through the wings of resting birds and the quiet hearts of sleepers. The planet was dreaming now, and in her dream, there was peace. The sky had become a living canvas, painted with slow-moving rivers of light. Each wave shimmered like breath upon glass, stretching from horizon to horizon. A memory of magnetism turned visible. It was as if the heavens themselves had begun to whisper, not with words, but with color, tone, and movement. Those who stood beneath these skies felt something ancient stir within them, as though the earth was softly speaking through the auroras. The fading magnetic field did not end life, it awakened awareness. People stood on mountains and rooftops, silent and small beneath the vast illumination, feeling a strange connection between the heart and the heavens. Nights no longer belonged to darkness. The stars were clearer, nearer, as though the cosmic veil had been gently lifted. The moonlight wove through the new auroras, creating shifting halos of gold and green that shimmered like water. Every movement of the wind carried a delicate hum, not a sound that ears could catch, but one that hearts could sense. It was the earth breathing differently now, speaking a slower language, one made of silence and light. Animals seemed to listen too. Flocks of birds glided in slow, uncertain circles, their instincts faltering in the absence of the magnetic song that once guided them. Whales rose to the surface, their songs deeper and more sorrowful, echoing across the great blue. Yet, even in their confusion, there was grace. Nature had entered a kind of meditation. Every leaf, every wave, every gust of air seemed to move with intention, as if the whole planet were learning to breathe again under this whispering sky. And the humans, fragile and curious, began to adapt in their own quiet way. They turned off the lights to see better. They stayed up late just to watch the skies shimmer and shift, their hearts calm even as they wondered what this meant. No one felt panic anymore. The fear had faded with the noise of the old world. What replaced it was reverence, a quiet awe that drew people closer to the earth they had forgotten to listen to. The whispering sky did not just show light, it showed connection. It blurred the boundaries between night and day, between what was earthly and what was celestial. Time itself softened, stretching like a slow tide. The earth, stripped of her magnetic shield, had begun to sing in a new voice, one of vulnerability and beauty. The days that followed drifted like dreamtime. The air carried a pale shimmer, as though the light itself had thinned and become tender. Every sunrise arrived with a strange softness. The edges of the sun diffused into ribbons that touched clouds like silk. People began to rise early just to watch it, to feel the hush before warmth filled the fields. And when night returned, the auroras came again, stretching wide and slow. They no longer felt foreign or frightening. They felt alive, almost companion-like, as if the sky had grown a pulse. Beneath that moving curtain of light, silence deepened. Villages dimmed their lamps so they could see the glow. Cities, too, turned quieter as if obeying some unspoken rhythm. Streets that once echoed with machines and chatter now hummed with whispers and footsteps. Couples lay on balconies, hands entwined, watching the heavens sway like music. Children, usually restless, fell asleep under windows that glimmered green. Even the restless minds found peace in this unplanned symphony. The sky had become a teacher, reminding humanity of stillness, of how to listen without expecting, of how to rest without fear. Sometimes, the lights moved so slowly that they seemed to breathe. People swore they could feel the motion in their chests, a rise and fall matching their own heartbeat. There were stories that the earth itself was healing, recalibrating, finding a new balance inside its fading shield. The scientists could explain some of it, the charged particles, the sun's quiet storms, but even they spoke softly now, as if language itself could break the fragile wonder. Everyone sensed that something sacred was unfolding, and in that awareness, hearts grew gentler. The absence of the magnetic field, The great invisible guard had not destroyed the world, it had invited humility. Without that unseen armor, humanity felt exposed yet more connected, like travelers under one great blanket of light. Fear no longer lived in the edges of thought, curiosity did. People began to write again, paint again, sing again, not to resist the change but to honor it. Art became the language of survival, and through it, the whispering sky found its echo in human hands and voices. The nights stretched on endlessly, each one glowing with a grace that defied reason. And those who watched long enough began to understand that what was fading was not protection, but separation. The earth was not losing itself. It was rediscovering its place among the stars, learning once more how to speak the quiet dialect of the cosmos. As the nights continued, something subtle began to unfold within the minds of those who watched. The more people gazed into the sky, the more they felt that the shimmering light was not merely above them, it was within them. The air itself carried a softness that slipped through skin and settled in the soul. It was as though the boundary between body and atmosphere had thinned, and humanity was breathing not just oxygen, but light. In the absence of the Earth's strong magnetic shield, the heavens had come closer, and with them came an intimacy that words could not frame. Dreams deepened. People spoke of visions that felt older than memory, of oceans glowing under starlit skies, of forests breathing with pale green veins of light, of forgotten songs that seemed to rise from the ground itself. The whispering sky had become a mirror, and in its luminous reflection, the planet saw herself not as a sphere of rock and sea, but as a being of light and pulse. Time seemed to flow differently now, not in straight lines, but in waves, rolling gently between dusk and dawn. The stars no longer felt like distant strangers. They were kin, watching softly from their cold, bright homes. The Earth's creatures, too, found new rhythms. The tides seemed to move with an unfamiliar grace, slower and more deliberate, as if drawn by a gentler moon. Trees turned their leaves toward the light ribbons that swam through the night, and fields shimmered faintly with dew that caught the auroral glow. Even the smallest insects glimmered faintly as they moved, their wings catching the sky's soft reflection. Life, instead of shrinking from this change, seemed to breathe with it. Every heartbeat, every rustle, every sigh of wind seemed stitched into the same quiet song. And in this stillness, humans began to sense something profound, a feeling that had no name but could be felt in every breath. It was not fear, not joy, not sorrow, but a tender belonging. The loss of the magnetic field had stripped away an invisible layer of distance between the world and the cosmos. It was as though the Earth had opened her arms to the universe, no longer shielded, no longer hidden, just being. For the first time in thousands of years, the planet's breath mingled freely with the breath of stars. Those who stayed awake until dawn often spoke of a sound, so faint it was almost imagined, a low, harmonic tone that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. It was the hum of the whispering sky, the lullaby of a planet at peace with its own fragility. Some called it the Earth Song. Others called it silence. But for those who listened, it became the most comforting sound in existence, a reminder that even in loss, there is beauty. Even in vulnerability, there is connection. And so the whispering sky remained, vast, alive, and endlessly soft. It was no longer a warning of what was gone, but a promise of what still remained. A new kind of harmony had begun, not born from strength, but from surrender. The Earth had entered a gentler chapter of her endless story, and under her shifting skies, life slept soundly, wrapped in the quiet light of belonging. Beneath the glowing skies and the murmuring winds, the Earth's heart continued to beat, slow, steady, ancient. Deep within her, far below the crust and stone, there was a rhythm that had not changed since the dawn of time. It pulsed like a whisper through molten rivers and hidden caverns, a quiet reminder that even when her shield faded, her soul endured. The surface world might shimmer and shift, but at her center, the Earth still breathed warmth. And in that warmth was memory, of fire, of water, of every living thing that had ever walked upon her skin. The fading of the magnetic field had softened the noise of the modern world. Power grids hummed less, radios whispered faintly, and the electric chaos that once filled the skies had gone still. Humanity could finally hear again, not machines, but the hum beneath everything. The Earth's heartbeat, once drowned by civilization's constant rhythm, rose into awareness like a slow drum in the dark. At night, when all else quieted, one could almost feel it, not in the ears, but in the bones. A deep, grounding thrum that seemed to hold the body and the spirit in place. People began to speak of this feeling as though it were sacred. They called it the Earth's silent heart. It was not something measured by science or captured by instruments. It was something felt, a resonance that moved through oceans, trees, and skin. Farmers said their crops grew with a different kind of patience now, as if listening to the soil. Travelers found themselves walking slower, pausing more often to breathe the air that seemed somehow richer, heavier with meaning. Even in the stillness, life had not stopped. It had deepened in remote valleys. Monks and wanderers meditated beneath the auroral glow, sensing the heartbeat beneath their feet. They said the silence was not empty. It was full of presence, full of unseen motion. The earth was speaking now not in magnetic force, but in vibration, a language that had no words, no grammar, no beginning or end, just feeling. And in that feeling, humanity found comfort. The sky, once fierce with color, began to calm as the planet adjusted to its new rhythm. The auroras still danced, but more softly now, as though they, too, had learned the tempo of the Earth's heart. Nights glowed like candlelight over oceans, and dawn rose not with fire, but with a gentle warmth that touched the world like a blessing. It was as if the planet herself had found a new equilibrium, one of surrender, one of peace. Those who listened closely could feel it, the silent heart of Earth, not broken, not fading, but resting. It beat beneath the soles of their feet, in the quiet of roots, in the hush between waves. It was the sound of endurance, the murmur of a world remembering itself, not through noise, but through stillness. There were moments now when time itself seemed to dissolve. Dawn came slowly, as if the sun hesitated before lifting above the horizon, and the air carried a fragrance of new beginnings. The magnetic hum that once coursed invisibly through every living thing had quieted, but in its place came another rhythm, slower, deeper, somehow older. People found themselves drawn outdoors without reason, stepping barefoot onto soil still cool with dew. They stood there listening, though nothing spoke. It was the kind of listening that feels like remembering in the hush that followed the great fading. The Earth's pulse became a shared secret. Poets tried to describe it, calling it the sound beneath silence, the still drum of creation. Scientists recorded vibrations that puzzled them, gentle tremors that didn't match tectonic motion, waves that seemed to move like breath rather than quake. Some said the planet was exhaling, releasing the tension of ages. Others said she was dreaming. Whatever the truth, the feeling spread, an awareness of being held by something immense and tender. The oceans mirrored this calm. Waves moved in slow procession, touching shorelines like hands that knew the world's shape by heart. At night, when the auroras brushed their light across the water, the reflection shimmered like veins of living silver. The sea, once restless and full of motion, had become contemplative. Sailors who ventured out to those glowing surfaces described an unearthly stillness, as though the ocean itself were listening to the same secret heartbeat that resonated through the land. Animals began to respond in quiet ways. Flocks of birds nested nearer to the ground. Their migrations shortened as if distance no longer mattered. Wolves howled less often, their calls softer, almost thoughtful. The forests, too, seemed to breathe differently, leaves turning with less urgency, roots spreading deeper, steadier. Everything had slowed into balance. The loss of the magnetic field, once feared as the end, had somehow become a teacher of calm. Humans, stripped of the invisible armor that once separated them from the cosmic winds, discovered a kind of trust they had never known. They were smaller now, humbler, but more awake. Nights under the whispering sky became gatherings of silence. Villagers lighting fires not for fear, but for warmth and presence. Music changed. It became slower, filled with open spaces and soft tones that seemed to mimic the earth's low pulse. Lullabies no longer spoke of stars far away, but of the ground beneath, of the mother that had always held them. The earth's heart, once lost beneath layers of technology and noise, was being heard again. Its sound was not something that could be captured, only felt. And in that feeling came healing, the slow mending of a bond too long ignored. It was not a return to the past, but a deepening into what had always been true, that the planet and her children had never been apart, only distracted. Now, in the absence of her great shield, the connection was bare and beautiful. Nights deepened into something sacred. The air grew heavy with quietness, as though even the stars paused their endless journey to listen. Under the softened glow of the auroras, humanity found itself slowing to match the planet's rhythm. Fires burned low, voices faded, and breath became the only sound that truly mattered. Somewhere beneath their feet, the Earth's pulse moved in waves, slow, patient, eternal. It was not the kind of heartbeat that demanded attention. It was one that simply was. A presence that asked nothing but awareness. Children, who once feared the dark, now slept easily beneath the glowing skies. Parents told stories not of gods or heroes, but of the earth herself, of how she had always sung softly beneath them, even when no one listened. Those stories spread like roots through every language, binding people across oceans and mountains. In them, the planet was no longer a distant mother, but a living companion, breathing in rhythm with every soul. It was as if losing her magnetic shield had peeled back a veil, revealing her face in the starlight. Tired, yes, but kind. In cities, towers still stood, but lights were dimmed to let the sky's colors through. Windows reflected soft greens and purples that painted walls like murals of calm. For the first time in centuries, humanity lived by the pace of the planet, not the ticking of machines. Markets opened when the sun warmed the air. Rest came when the auroras began to shimmer. Technology did not vanish. It simply quieted, blending into the background like a respectful guest in a sacred hall. The world was learning reverence again. Some said they could feel the earth dreaming. The tremors beneath their feet came not as warnings, but as sighs, movements of comfort, not distress. The molten rivers deep below whispered in frequencies too low for words, carrying the memory of mountains yet to rise and oceans yet to bloom. The planet was alive, utterly and unmistakably, and her silence was not emptiness but fullness. It was the stillness before creation, the pause between heartbeats that reminds life it is precious. As generations passed, children born under the whispering skies grew up with a quiet kind of wisdom. They learned to plant by the sound of wind, to fish by the color of the light, to rest when the earth's pulse slowed beneath storms. They spoke to her, not with prayers, but with gratitude. They understood that the planet's silence was a language, that stillness was not absence but attention. In their hearts, the old fear of fragility transformed into reverence. To live without the great magnetic shield was not to be unprotected, but to be in communion. And through it all, the Earth's heart kept beating, soft, slow, eternal. It was the rhythm beneath dreams, the hum between stars. Even as the universe expanded outward into cold infinity, here, in this fragile sphere of light and silence, one heartbeat endured. It said, "I am still here." And everything that listened, human, animal, ocean, and stone, answered with the same quiet truth. So are we. The world entered what people would later call the Age of Stillness. There was no proclamation, no single day when the change began. It unfolded the way dawn rises, one soft degree of light at a time. Humanity learned to move within longer breaths. Entire cities discovered a quieter rhythm, markets opening with the first warmth of morning, lamps dimming at twilight, so the new auroras could be seen. Without the constant hum of the old field, everything seemed to slow until it matched the patient tempo of the planet. Those who had feared the collapse found themselves surprised by gentleness. Crops grew slower but richer. Rain came in softer rhythms. Even storms had become deliberate, their thunder rolling like distant drums instead of breaking like war. People said the weather listened now, that the earth responded to calm with calm. Scientists smiled at the superstition but could not explain why winds had steadied, why seasons blended so seamlessly. The planet, stripped of its magnetic armor, seemed to have remembered grace. Night. The skies became the great cathedral of this new age. Curtains of light stretched across continents, not in violent bursts, but in fluid gestures that moved like thought. Communities gathered beneath them in silence, sitting together without need for words. It was enough simply to witness the slow dance of color and feel the pulse of the ground below. In those moments, the difference between earth and sky blurred. Everything breathed together, a single, vast organism remembering itself. Children grew up knowing the constancy of wonder. They learned their letters by tracing the paths of light overhead, their lullabies made from the rhythm of waves. They spoke of the planet not as it, but as her, not as possession, but as presence. The earth had become both home and heartbeat, and the people who lived upon her walked softly, aware of the immense silence beneath every step. And in that silence, life flourished, not the hurried kind that races against time, but the steady kind that belongs entirely to it. The age of stillness had not been born of fear or survival. It was born of listening. Humanity had finally heard the earth's slow song and chosen to move in tune. The years that followed felt as though the planet itself had exhaled. The rush that once defined existence faded into patience. Rivers took new paths, carving curves instead of cutting through the land. Trees grew broader, their roots anchoring deeply into soil that no longer trembled from the fever of machines. The faint hum of technology became softer, blending with the wind until it sounded like another voice of nature. Humanity no longer lived apart from the world. They had stepped back inside it. Work changed. No one measured hours anymore. Time was marked by light and shadow, by the rhythm of birds, by the steady beat of the earth's quiet heart. Farmers spoke to the soil before sowing, and though no answer came, they felt understood. Builders shaped homes to echo the curvature of hills and rivers, structures that breathed with the air rather than resisted it. Even in the greatest cities, walls were covered with green, gardens climbing toward the auroras as if to touch the breath of heaven. Each night, the people gathered in circles. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they sang, sometimes they simply sat. The sound of silence became a kind of prayer, a collective act of gratitude. There was no sense of isolation now. The fading of the magnetic field had revealed something the old world never noticed, the invisible thread between every living thing. It was this connection that held them, stronger than any shield could. Children born into this age were said to be calmer, their eyes deep with reflection even in infancy. They grew listening to the world rather than trying to master it. When they spoke, they used words that carried softness, still, gentle, listen, breathe. They learned from the trees that time could stretch infinitely when you stopped chasing it. They learned from rivers that strength could flow without noise. These children became the keepers of the new wisdom, a generation raised not on invention, but on attention. Above them, the sky continued to whisper. Sometimes the auroras drifted low enough that one could almost feel the air move with their light. The people stretched out their hands, and though they touched nothing, they swore they could feel warmth, an embrace made of color, of energy, of memory. It was as though the earth's missing shield had not vanished but changed form, spreading through every heart, turning protection into presence. And beneath it all, the same deep rhythm persisted, a heartbeat slow and eternal, echoing through ocean, soil, and soul. Humanity had finally learned to hear it not as a distant force, but as a reminder. Every breath they took, every step upon the ground, was an answer to that rhythm, a shared vow that they would move gently within the silence, that they would never again forget the voice of their home. There came a time when even memory slowed. The chaos of the past, the roaring engines, the restless search for more, became like a distant dream fading into dawn. In its place grew a quieter knowledge, one carried not in words, but in rhythm. People began to live by the pulse they could feel in the soles of their feet, a vibration soft but certain. The earth spoke through that hum, reminding them that all life was not above her, but within her. Across the continents, stories became the new architecture. People built their days from tales rather than towers. Grandparents told children how the skies once burned with noise and light, and how the world had nearly forgotten to listen. The children listened, wide-eyed beneath the auroras, and promised silently never to forget again. They would inherit not machines of progress, but lessons of stillness, a legacy of peace carved into the soil and air, The oceans, too, seemed gentler now. The tides moved with patient precision, their silver waves reflecting the endless glow of the whispering sky. Fishermen spoke softly when casting their nets, singing low songs to the waters that had fed them for centuries. They no longer fished for greed but for gratitude, taking only what they needed and leaving the sea untouched in its calm majesty. The loss of the magnetic shield had once been feared as doom, yet it had transformed into something else entirely, a kind of awakening. The auroras, once fierce, now painted the heavens like slow brushstrokes of a divine hand. They shifted without haste, each ripple of light carrying the memory of the world before silence. Some said they could hear faint music within them, a sound too low for the ear but perfect for the soul. It was the resonance of balance, the voice of a world that had learned to breathe again. And when that music rose, the people felt their hearts beat in time with it, a shared pulse that connected mountain to ocean, forest to city, being to being. Art flourished, not for fame or currency, but as expression of gratitude. Painters captured the slow dance of auroras. Poets wrote in verses so soft they felt like wind through grass. Musicians played fewer notes, letting silence be the melody. The age of stillness had become a global song composed of pauses, breaths, and echoes. Even sleep felt different now, deeper, dream-filled, like floating upon the hum of the earth herself. And as all of life softened into harmony, the planet's heart grew steady. The fading of her magnetic field had not ended her protection, it had changed its form. The shield that once encircled her in silence now lived within her children, woven into their awareness. The earth no longer needed to guard them. She only needed them to listen. And listen they did, every dawn, every dusk, every moment between breaths.